Hello, I'm Eric Snodgrass, and thank you for watching today's Ag Forecast brought to you by Nutrien Ag Solutions. To begin today's video, I'd like to give you a bit of an international update. So we're going to start off here by looking at the CPC gauge data, going back over the last 30 days, looking at precipitation anomalies. Let's head over here to parts of India and China first. The last 30 days have been wet across much of India, but you can notice how wet it has been right here along the west coast against the Arabian Sea. And that was mostly due to the fact that a tropical cyclone developed here back over the last week or so and has tracked right along the coast. Now, what I was interested in knowing was what impact did this have as this very heavy rainfall pushed into this section of India right here. And that particular area grows a lot of cotton. So this is important because if 30% of India's cotton is grown in that area, and we just saw flooding rains go into that area, and remember that India is one of the largest cotton producing countries in the world, we need to see what the potential impacts of this are going to be. So we'll be watching it to see if we get any sort of news out of this area about the potential impacts. Now, while that first tropical cyclone was in the Arabian Sea, there is another one coming over here in the Bay of Bengal, and it's going to be taking shape over the next few days, and it's going to be making this turn toward the north and eventually come right here into this side of India. And the ensemble forecast from the European models suggest that this will be the corridor in through here that we're going to have to watch for this next event to potentially be producing a lot of very heavy rain and flooding. Since we're talking about India, I do want to mention right now some things that are going on in the Indian Ocean. You do start to see some cooler water over here by Africa with warmer water, on this side of the Indian Ocean. That would appear to be the negative phase of the Indian Ocean dipole, which is important for Australian weather, also for India and Africa. But I just want to make a point here that we're hovering very close to normal in terms of the strength of the Indian Ocean dipole. It's not an event that's diving way down here, nor is it like we saw in fall of 2019 where the Indian Ocean dipole sent way up high, helping the brush fires that we saw in Australia. Just something to think about here. From there, I would like to show you what the current European model forecast is for June, July, and August. This would be the beginning of the Indian monsoon. We do see that for much of India, above average precipitation, in other words, a stronger monsoon, but I'll be curious to see if the models properly picked up on what's happening here again on the west coast. That is a very agriculturally productive area, and so to see the models not favoring heavy rainfall in the start of the monsoon there is just important to take note of. Let's go from here over to China. Now you notice that the forecast for June, July, and August is drier in this section, southeastern parts of China, wetter pushing toward Beijing here, but possibly pockets of drier weather farther to the north. Just for a quick geography lesson, this would be called the North China Plain. This is the Manchurian Plain. And why we care so much about these areas is because right now, let's blow this up a little bit. We can see that the latest 1-month drought severity index here from CHIRPS is suggesting that that area around Beijing is showing up drier, where we've been wet throughout this spring farther to the south. Now, thinking about that, I want to just show you where we grow corn in China. You notice that about, what is this? Maybe 20% of the crop, maybe 25% is grown south of Beijing, and about 60% of the crop is grown here, both in the in the North China Plain and the Manchurian Plain, and the rest is around the remainder of the country. So I was curious, and one of the tools, at least at my disposal to look at this, is Ndvi Imagery. Now, what are we looking at here? First, the color bar. The closer you get to this side of the color bar, the healthier the crop looks from space. Now remember, it's early. This is just late May here. It's much more important in June, July, and August. But on this side of the color spectrum, the darker shades would be less healthy. Now what we're going to do is we're going to compare last year to this year. All right. So the slider is going to let me do that. You're currently looking at May 11th, 2020. And as I slide this over, we now see 2021. Now, I'm just going to go back and forth, and I want you to kind of keep your eye around Beijing, just as an example. This is 2020. This is 2021. And I know it's subtle, but if I go back and forth here, we do start to see some differences from a year ago to this year. And if I had to just paint it with a broad brush here, I would say I see less of the bright colors, indicating that maybe this crop doesn't look as great as it did last year at the start. And just remember, in this part of the world, so here's Beijing, we do have quite a bit of mountains that are nearby, but even tucked into these mountains, if I just kind of zoom in here and show you what this looks like, we find there's a lot of fields in here. I mean, just look right here in this valley. You keep coming in and you start to notice there's a lot of just terraced fields grown here. So just to let you know what this part of the world looks like in terms of agriculture. It's certainly different from where I live, and it's also quite different from what we grow in Europe. A last quick international update on Europe. Black Sea is here. Notice the Russian wheat belt and parts of eastern Ukraine have been wet over the last 30 days, as has a lot of the interior of Europe. Turkey has shown up as one of our driest regions. Just something to take note of here. Now, from there, let's come back to the United States. I have a whole suite of tools at my disposal in the U.S. to look at these same factors. We're going to start with soil moisture. This is the top the top 3 feet or 100 centimeters, looking at the soil moisture percentile. This is a NASA product. And while it's been extremely wet with that open Gulf of Mexico flow and the flooding that we've had down here in Texas and Louisiana and Arkansas, take note of how dry it is in parts of the Mid-Atlantic. In the Great Lakes Basin, look at lower Michigan, parts of Ohio, Pennsylvania, Ontario. And then as you get here into Minnesota, Iowa, Wisconsin, and then of course the drought issues we've been talking about in the northern plains, these are areas that we need to get this moisture returned farther and farther to the north. In the west, we're into the dry season now, so we don't expect relief this time of year, but it is still very much possible with late spring rains to get that moisture farther to the north. Because over the last 30 days, I just want to point out something. In the areas I'm going to highlight here, we can see that there are large sections of very productive ground that have seen less than a third of normal precipitation throughout the last 30 days. It has been extremely wet to the south, as you can see here, and even in parts of the high plains of Colorado. But pockets of drought still exist here in the southern and central plains, and the west did not get the moisture it would have loved to have seen in the month of April to kind of push us in to the late spring and early summer time period. Pause the video and take a closer look at this map if you want to just zoom in on your region and see what's going on. But from there, over the last 3 days, we have seen torrential rains from eastern Texas into Louisiana, parts of Arkansas, more severe storms in parts of Texas, but you can almost see the streaky nature of the storms as they extend here farther to the north. Now remember, this is an area I was talking about as having pockets of drought. We've seen it showed up on the drought monitor as well, and the soil moisture tells us a story. Just notice that through Iowa, some of these storms have streaked through into Minnesota. Some places have gotten plenty of heavy rainfall, but many locations have been missed. Do we have more chances coming up in the future? Well, we do as long as the pattern stays like this. You see, this high that's sitting here on the east isn't going anywhere anytime soon. So the flow is just open out of the Gulf, and we're going to continue to see a corridor right in through here of potentially heavy rainfall. Now, some of that moisture is getting pulled back around into a developing low in Wyoming, and that is going to increase not only our precipitation chances in the northern plains and Montana, but also snow in Montana too, where we have winter weather advisories and winter storm warnings. Red flag warnings down here in the Great Basin and to the south. We have winter weather advisories pushing up against the east-facing slopes here of the Sierra Nevada, Klamath Mountains, that region. Very windy in California, and our flood region is still down here where more storms are expected. Speaking of those storms, this is today, the Storm Prediction Center's outlook for the 20th. And we're going to watch this section of the northern and high plains as having a risk of severe storms late tonight. General thunderstorm activity, though, in a broad corridor here in the midsection of the United States. So let's go over to our high-resolution models to take a look at the timing of that precip. Let's get you out here to about 6 a.m. So we notice widely scattered showers moving through. We have the snow on the backside here. And as we play this forward throughout the day today, this is 1, 2, 3 o'clock in the afternoon, it's just going to be a stream of showers and storms right in through this area. But late in the day, as the atmosphere destabilizes, this will be the region we're going to watch coming out of Wyoming into Montana, northern Colorado, and then eventually into the western side of these states here. We're going to be seeing these storms erupt. Some of them most certainly could be severe, putting down very heavy rainfall, hail, and they could also be supercells, which means they could rotate and produce tornadoes. As we keep playing, though, out through the day on Thursday and now into early Friday morning, you see it as clear as I do. There's a trough in the west, a ridge in the east, and in between, this almost fire hose of precipitation right in through this area. Now, snowfall. Through this weekend, this is the area we're going to watch coming out of Wyoming, getting here into Montana, getting here into Alberta, Saskatchewan, that corridor could see quite a bit of heavy snow. And as the deeper troughs keep setting up here over the Great Basin, we're going to get some snow, like I said, on the east-facing slopes of the Sierra Nevada and throughout Nevada. Zooming in just specifically on Montana, the chances of getting very heavy snow pushing up against the mountains is high. And I know this isn't pleasant, it's May, but this is moisture. And that's going to percolate down, get into the river system, and help the drought situation that is in this area. So I'm pretty happy to see that. There's a pattern change, though, we need to be talking about. And the pattern is going to shift from what we had in April and early May, which was cold for much of the United States and Canadian prairie, and extremely wet across the south and southeast. You see, the flow, remember I was talking about it the last few videos, across central parts of North America was out of the northwest. That's what sent us over cool. But in the south, strong jet stream level winds here supported high wind shear values and a lot of moisture return to the south and all of the incredibly wet weather we've seen from Texas and at times even all the way over to Georgia, although it's been dry here as of late. Well, the pattern shift is evident by looking at the jet stream level winds. If you remember that video, maybe 2 weeks ago, I said, gosh, the flow is just coming down like this. It's like this weird check mark. Remember that? Northwest and then bouncing back out into the North Atlantic. Well, as we evolve forward here and these troughs begin to develop here over the west, this now sends our flow more like this. And now we've got more what we call southwest flow. And it's southwest running around a larger ridge that keeps reestablishing itself over the southeast. So as I play this forward, do you notice what I'm talking about going through this week on next week, Tuesday? I mean, we're out here next Wednesday already. You see the flow is here. It's there. And that is it happens this time of year. The jet stream is retreating to the north, but that southwest flow is what is critical to giving us this increased chances of seeing some precipitation. So let's go look at it on the European model. Now, we've walked through the next 36 hours already, so you know what to expect all the way out to Friday morning. This is going to be the corridor through which we're going to see just this, right here in the near term, the flow of moisture staying right in this area. It's going to come around this high. Remember, it's streaky. This whole area doesn't get rain, but we're going to be seeing some storms popping up in there. Montana into North Dakota, Friday morning, that weak low is going to try to pop out here, and that's where we're going to see those precipitation chances. But now working our way through Saturday and then into Sunday, but the only thing that's going to change here is, the high's going to stay there, but you see this other high coming out of Manitoba toward Ontario? There will be a cold front along its leading edge. And what's significant about that is it will start to push, this is Sunday evening, getting into Monday morning. That is going to push moisture into this part of lower Michigan, an area that's been extremely dry. No, this is not kind of like the saving rains that we need, but it is rain. In the meantime, remember how we talked about the changes in the jet stream pattern? There are a pair of troughs coming into the northwest, into the northern plains, into this area. And those troughs are just a part of that southwest flow signal that we talked about. And what that's going to do is it's going to send systems that way. If I just rock back Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, you can see how the flow is sending them this direction. So getting into early next week, this is now Tuesday evening, getting out into Wednesday. When does the moisture return to the mid-Atlantic? Could we get a front there by next Thursday? Possibly, but unfortunately high pressure just seems to want to occupy the East Coast all the way out to day 10. And if we just take a look at that total precip for the next week, the southeast is extremely dry over the next week and getting hot. This is our narrow corridor of heavier precipitation, but look at the moisture return from Quebec through Ontario, getting into parts of Manitoba, Saskatchewan, southern Alberta, and then back into Montana. It will return some moisture here to North Dakota, Minnesota, Wisconsin as well, but I am concerned that there could be a region right in through here that does not get the adequate moisture that we would want to see. All right, so that's your next 7 days. Maybe it's easier to see all of this by looking at a precipitation anomaly map. Pause the video if you want to take a closer look here. But what I notice here is that there are pockets in the plains, and there's a large region, including the Ohio River Valley, clear to the southeast and over to the mid-Atlantic and to the northeast, that's just going to miss out on this. But we can't argue with the return of moisture to this area, especially given what the canola crop looks like in parts of Saskatchewan and Manitoba, and the moisture returning here to Montana. All of that very solid and positive signal. From there, jet stream pattern out into day 10. Well, the models have clued in on a trough here and a trough there, and I want to talk to you again at the very end of the video about this trough. But the flow is just generally doing this. It's more north, and the models are really washing out the trough that is over here, stretching, what is that, the 110th, 115th meridian. Now, why I say that is because, generally speaking, flow coming out of a trough would indicate rising motion here. But the models have washed out all of the features. And so when you look out there, you just see, oh, yeah, it's going to rain in here. And that's simply because there's a trough in that area. I have very low confidence at this point out into week 2. I wouldn't look at this for a moment and just say it's just going to be wet everywhere in here into week 2. We'll have to watch this pattern evolve to see the shortwave features that move through. The GFS has a different story. While it still says trough, the flow is just a mess. And as a result, it's going to do the same thing. See it? That would be our area we're watching. Is it drier in through here? Well, I'll tell you, these folks would want nothing more than it to be dry. But I don't like to see this dryness extending here over to the southeast up into the mid-Atlantic. But as I said, I have very low confidence in this week 2 pattern as we start to make some sort of transition. Next 10 days, cooler weather here in the Canadian Prairie. A lot of this dominated by the next few days in that area. But we are opening a broad sector here to almost summer-like warmth over the next 10 days, and I'm expecting the crop just to jump out of the ground as we do some rapid accumulation of heat in this area. Let's break it down day by day here first with high temperatures. The west is getting a bit of a brief cool down here while the east goes over quite hot. This is Thursday's highs getting into Friday and Saturday. So very warm, talking a lot of 80s spread in this area. This is a lot of cloud cover induced cooling in this area here, but still it's warm. But the west coast, very cool, and up in Montana, we're still cold, all right? As we go into next week, this is now getting out here to Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. You now start to see into next week, we're going to have 90-degree weather in this, I can include Florida there, in this whole area. And possibly we could be looking at some of our first triple-digit heat down here in the southeast. Now, what's got me concerned about that region is that looking at evaporation rates, we're not getting much precipitation there, but our evaporation rate's starting to top 1.5 inches over the next week. That's getting to be pretty high, and I'm just concerned that we're going to see some flash drought conditions develop in this area. Because as we look out to day 5 through 10, we could be seeing temperatures in this corridor. Again, this is day 5 through 10, all the way to the end of the month, that are averaging 10 to maybe upwards of 20 degrees above normal. So extremely hot conditions here, and just so you know, the heat builds back into the Central Valley of California during this time as well. From there, MJO, very briefly, it is moving here north of Australia and over into the Western Pacific. And generally speaking, while we start to lose the strength of this teleconnection on our temperature patterns as we get into summer, for late spring, this is the warmer side of things. The colder conditions are here. So using all of that, our long-range forecast from the ECMWF reflects it. It tells us the jet stream's moving north. It tells us we have more southwest flow. And generally across the United States, things are going to be mild, more mild than average, warmer than average through the next month. This, again, European weeklies looking out through the entire month of June. Where I'm going to finish up with is what's going on in the tropics. We have the National Hurricane Center monitoring its first system here. It's currently non-tropical, but it's expected to transition into more of a subtropical core. So we're going to watch the core temperatures here change in the middle of this system. It's not a threat to the United States, but as it curls around and heads up toward Greenland, remember I said we need to watch that trough in Greenland? This will reinforce low pressure in that area, meaning that the warmth that we see across the East Coast and the ridging there could be more of a near-term permanent feature to be discussing. Now, I'm going to keep an eye on all of this and monitor it over the weekend, and I'll report back to you on Monday, okay? Appreciate your attention this week, and I'll talk to you then. Thanks.